In this image, we see a young woman from the Sioux tribe who lived on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. The photograph was taken by Jesse H. Bratley, a teacher who worked in indigenous schools from 1893 to 1903. He lived closely with several native communities, documenting aspects of their culture and lifestyle during a time of major changes. In 1900, the Greater America Exposition in Omaha, Nebraska, brought together various indigenous representatives to showcase their traditions and share their perspectives. Among them was Ironhawk, a leader of the Oglala Lakota tribe, part of the Sioux Nation. His presence as one of the delegates highlighted the importance of his people's culture at a time of profound change in the United States. This scene takes us to Montana in the United States, where Chief Lewison led the Flathead tribe. In 1908, the photographer N.A. Forsyth captured this leader in an image that became a silent testimony to his people's culture and strength. The Underwood and Underwood Company, for which Forsyth worked, captured not only the face of a great leader, but also fragments of a story that withstood the test of time. At the end of the 19th century, photographer L.A. Huffman was committed to capturing moments that went beyond mere images. He worked at a company specializing in producing and distributing stereoscopic photographs, a feature that created an impressive sense of depth for that time. In 1880, Huffman recorded a striking portrait, Spotted Eagle, an indigenous leader of the Itazipcho Lakota tribe, also known as the Sans Arc. In the heart of Arizona, there is a place that carries echoes of an ancient culture, Canyon de Chelly. There, a woman from the Navajo tribe masters the art of weaving sheep's wool, creating rugs and blankets that pass down through generations. This moment was captured by the lens of Carl Moon, a photographer, painter, and writer who, in the early 20th century, devoted himself to portraying the life and heritage of Native American peoples. In a photographic record from the late 19th century, we see a young woman from the Ute people, a group that lives in the mountainous regions of the western United States and preserves a language with nomadic roots. She wears a long, dark outfit adorned with fringes and embroidery that reflect aspects of her identity. The image is part of a collection dedicated to documenting in detail the life and culture of Native American peoples at that time. In this historic record, we see two leaders of the Oglala Lakota tribe, part of the Sioux, posing alongside a U.S. Army officer. On one side is Chief American Horse, who served as an interpreter and scout, supporting military operations. On the other side is Chief Red Cloud, who once led a war against the United States over control of the Powder River Territory. Between them, in uniform, is Frank North, who was responsible for organizing and leading the Pawnee Scouts, a group of natives who served as allies to the Army. The photograph features Bird Wild Hog, also called Hedgehog, a member of the Cheyenne tribe. This portrait was taken in 1890 by photographer Christian Barthelmess, who worked at Fort Q in Montana. Bird Wild Hog served as an Army scout, and his story is intertwined with that of his father, who was one of the Northern Cheyenne leaders during the escape from the Indian Territory in 1879. This episode symbolizes the resistance of a people determined to protect their traditions amid the pressures of a turbulent time. This photograph, taken in 1880 by L.A. Huffman in the state of Montana, United States, shows a member of the Crow tribe, a people who lived on the plains and in the mountains of the region. He wears clothing characteristic of his culture and holds a firearm, revealing his skill in hunting large animals like buffalo and elk. Kezkayo, a man of the Cree nation, lived in both Canada and the United States. His English nickname was Bob Small, a term that may have come about due to his tail-like haircut, which was unusual for an indigenous person at the time. In 1906, he headed to Butte in the state of Montana. There, he ended up being photographed by F.E. Piso, known for portraying several Native American peoples. On the banks of the Little Bighorn River near Billings, Montana, a member of the Crow tribe prepares to take part in a large gathering that brings together different indigenous peoples of the Great Plains. It is the early 20th century, And everything comes to life at the Crow Indian Fair, an annual gathering that carries the strength of ancestral traditions and stories. Kiatati belonged to the Laguna people, an indigenous group from the southwestern United States. Her native name carried the heritage of generations, but records show she was also called Loti or Lota Atsi, nicknames given by Spanish or American colonizers. In 1904, she lived in Laguna Pueblo in New Mexico, where her identity blended with the historical changes of that time. Matowitcotco, also called Matowitco or Matowitco, was part of the Yankton tribe of the Dakota people. His name, in his language, carries meanings such as brown bear, crazy bear, or foolish grizzly bear. In 1872, he was photographed by Alexander Gardner, a photographer known for capturing moments of the Civil War and portraying Native leaders in Montana in the early 20th century. A photograph by N.A. Forsyth shows Native Americans in front of an automobile, a technology recently introduced by European colonizers. This encounter captures much more than just a simple curiosity. It reveals the clash between ancient customs and a novelty that was beginning to transform these communities' way of life. In 1891, John C.H. Grable captured a striking scene from the daily life of the Lakota, a people who inhabited the northern plains of America. In the center of this photograph, we see tippees, conical tents built with wood and covered by animal hides or canvas. This type of structure offered versatility, as it could be set up and taken down quickly, following seasonal changes and the search for game. In this image, taken around 1920, we see a woman from the Kiowa tribe, a people of the Great Plains in the United States. She wears a traditional outfit made of hide, adorned with a beaded necklace, a richly embroidered belt, and a headscarf. Each item reveals the Kiowas' strong connection to their identity and their appreciation for their art and craftsmanship. In this photograph, we see Sitting Bull, an indigenous leader of the Lakota people, part of the Hunkpapa subgroup, who became one of the main symbols of resistance to U.S. government policies on the Great Plains. The record, made around 1880, is by David Francis Barry, a photographer who dedicated himself to documenting personalities and landscapes of the American West throughout the 19th century. In the early 20th century, on the lands of the Crow Reservation in Montana, an artisan leans over the frame of a tippee made of hides. Dressed in traditional clothing, he prepares brushes that he dips into paints extracted from plants and minerals, creating designs that carry centuries of history. The scene shows a common moment in local life, but reveals the strength of a culture that values its roots and expresses this heritage in every detail of daily life. In 1870, a young Iroquois posed for a portrait that would cross through time. The photograph was taken by Richard Throssell, an artist of Cree origin who was adopted by the Crow tribe and devoted much of his work to documenting native cultures. The image is not just a portrait. It carries the strength of a confederation that inhabited the Great Lakes region and reveals fragments of its living history. Garnet was a member of the Oglala Lakota Nation, one of the 7 Sioux groups that occupied the northern plains of the United States. In 1877, he posed for photographer Charles Milton Bell, known for portraying many indigenous leaders. In the image, Garnet appears wearing a feather headdress, a beaded necklace, a fur coat, and a sacred pipe, items that symbolized his heritage and position in the community. In the plains of the central region of the United States lived Lusaku Rikalahaw, a member of the Pawnee tribe. His name referred to a special time of day, revered in his people's language for its deep connection to the sun. In 1869, he was captured in a photograph by the Jackson brothers, notable professionals in Omaha, Nebraska. These photographers were dedicated to documenting both the lives of native peoples and the landscapes that shaped the American West. In 1889, a young Apache woman poses in front of the lens of D.B. Chase, a photographer devoted to documenting the life of several Native American tribes. At that time, the southwestern United States was a stage of constant tension, as the American government encroached on lands that the Apache had inhabited for generations. While Chase's camera captured the young woman's steady gaze, her community faced intense pressure to abandon customs, territorial ties, and traditional ways of life. At the end of the 19th century, more than 500 indigenous delegates gathered in Omaha, Nebraska, to attend the United States Indian Congress. Among them was American Horse Chief, a leader of the Sioux tribe, depicted in a photograph taken by Adolph F. Muir, under the direction of Frank A. Reinhardt. The image not only shows this leader's striking presence, but also the historical context in which various indigenous nations presented their cultures at the 1898 Trans-Mississippi and International Exposition. The Cheyenne Nation was organized into 6 military societies, and the Dog Soldiers, also called Dogmen, stood out for their responsibility in maintaining order and defending the group. They followed the guidelines of a council of 44 chiefs, renewed every 10 years, ensuring unity and the protection of the people. The Dog Soldier Society arose when the prophet Sweet Medicine, in a cave in the Black Hills, received 4 sacred arrows. In 1879, the German-American photographer John K. Hillers captured 2 young women from the Hopi tribe in front of an adobe wall in Arizona. They appear in traditional clothing, wearing silver necklaces and earrings, forming a scene that reveals aspects of indigenous culture preserved for many generations. This image is part of a series of 72 photographs produced during an expedition to the southwestern United States, organized by the Bureau of American Ethnology. It is a record that invites us to observe details of Hopi life, reinforcing the richness of their traditions and how they have been preserved over time.